Hello, hi, and welcome to this episode of Geography Girl. Today, I'm going to be telling some blood-curdling stories of spooky shit that's happened on the Underground in London. If you've ever been walking through one of these stations alone at night, you will know just how scary they can be, and there are many accounts of how devastatingly haunted they are. Now you might be thinking, Geography Girl, ghosts aren't real. How is this paranormal spooky shit related to geography? Well, it has plenty to do with it, and I'll tell you why. Wherever humans have been, so ghosts have followed. From ships in the middle of the ocean to the crowded streets of London, from the dark depths of the earth to moonlit hilltops, from the humblest of cottages to royal palaces. Rarely ghosts roam or linger aimlessly. There is usually a reason. The spirits of the dead most obviously return to those places where someone had died or where corpses lay buried or hidden. There are locations where ghosts appear that did not have explicit associations with death, such as bridges, roads, and pools. One way of trying to understand the significance of this diverse geography of haunting is to consider them in relation to liminal space. Liminality is a state of being on one border of two defined states of existence. It could refer to symbolic and transitional stages, such as those rites of passages, the relationship between life, death, the afterlife, and natural and man-made features in the landscape. Physical boundaries such as henges can have a much deeper and symbolic in terms of the boundaries between the living and dead, or the worlds of mortals and gods. Natural features such as rivers also serve as liminal places where two worlds meet, and where people gather to reinforce the separation between them or try to permeate it briefly for religious or magical purposes. Administrative boundaries were constructed for pragmatic rather than religious purposes and can also infer a deeper liminal significance. Another point to consider is how is a changing environment influencing the landscape of haunting? How, for example, did enclosures impact ghost traditions in Midland communities? And how did the drainage of the wetlands change hauntings in the Somerset and in the Fens? Researchers from Japan have gone where few else have tried to go to quantify the geospatial elements of ghost sightings. Most geographic studies have used qualitative methods such as material analysis or interviews. They found that different types of ghosts appear in accordance with the surrounding ecosystem. There are 114 sites with georeference and their distribution trends analysed. The result was that they detected a withdrawal of haunting sites from urban areas over the last 100 years. The study found ghost sightings mainly at high altitudes and at water storage sites in Japan, in mountainous areas near cities and natural sloping land, a marginalised position in the real world. But cities are also great examples of haunted sites because they are anomalous but highly charged spaces. According to Nigel Thrift, we are haunted by apparitions, which are the unintended consequences of the complexity of modern cities in which multiple time spaces are being produced, which overlap, interact, and interfere. Many studies have found that hauntings to be related to emotional senses of attachment to place, fear, guilt, loss, rage, making productive sense of the absent, mysterious, and terrifying aspects of modern life. The ghost can represent a past tragedy or an injustice, and our encounter with it might lead to new engagement with the present. The disinterring of the colonial past in countries like Australia is a good example of this kind of productive encounter with spectres of past traumas. The refugee or exile remembering home or returning only to find it changed is very similarly haunted. We might also be spooked by traces of those who have gone before us, not because we sense a tragedy or loss, but precisely because we know so little about them. Geoffrey Gora, who presented the concept of the death in 1955, puts forward that death has become taboo and distant from our daily lives. Places of birth and death have been isolated from the home to hospitals and funeral homes in the last century. This may be the reason why ghosts, spectres, and haunted sites, which are entities located in the borderline between life and death, have also been cut off from the context of daily life over the last 100 years. But ghosts are a stubborn presence in British culture. Polls show ghost belief has more than doubled since the Second World War. Given that the Underground was used as a shelter during the Blitz, it's easy to understand why these areas are the setting for many ghost sightings. Traditionally, ghost sightings in England have adhered to parish boundaries. These date back to the Anglo-Saxon period, which were delineated by linking up recognisable landscape features such as tracks, burial mounds, rivers, crossings and streams. And tube stations could be seen as the modern version of this. The underground also has a Gothic notoriety. Tunneling into the ancient city has uncovered many sites of bloodshed and disaster. The gallows, for example, are said to have stand opposite Camden Town tube station, whilst the station itself is rumoured to be built on the home of an infamous witch named Mother Damnable. When Mother Damnable died, hundreds of people were repeated to have seen the devil entering her cottage. And London Underground does seem to have more than its fair share of ghosts. Aldgate Station, which was built on the pit of a plague, has its own ghost log. How can we account for the sounds and apparitions that ordinary people have witnessed on the tube? It could be infrasound, which is a noise that is too low for humans to hear, putting us on edge by triggering our fight or flight mechanism. Too much infrasound can make us feel cold, make us shiver, make the hair stand up on our necks, and even lead us to glimpsing shadowy objects and having more extreme reactions to unexpected noises. So let's get into 3 of my favourite ghostly encounters, which I've taken from the award-winning Serpents pen blog by David Castleton. King's Cross Underground Station and St Pancras have a dark and tragic history. In November 1987, a small fire exploded, creating an inferno that burned into the early hours of the following morning. 31 people lost their lives and 100 had to be taken to hospital. Hundreds more were trapped deep into the flaming station and managed to escape on the still running tube trains. This catastrophe may explain an apparition seen by some passengers on one of the tunnels leading to the underground station. A woman, aged about 25, dressed in jeans and 1980s style clothing, has been spotted with her arms outstretched, sobbing uncontrollably. During the first reported encounter with her in 1998, a passenger stopped to ask the woman if she was okay. The passenger was startled when another passenger walked through the woman as if she wasn't there. The young woman disappeared, but several passengers have seen her since. A far more bizarre legend associated with King's Cross suggests that the Celtic Queen Boudica, who led a ferocious rebellion against the Roman rule in around 600 AD, in around 60 AD, is buried under one of the platforms in the mainline station. Some say her grave lies beneath platform 8, others platform 9 or 10. Boudica's ghost is rumoured to roam the tunnels of the underground station directly below her tomb. Boudica destroyed St Albans and Colchester, as well as the vital settlement of Londyminium, in a horror show of flames, slaughter, and rampaging chariots before the Romans eventually defeated her. Even today, a red layer of oxidized iron and burnt clay can be seen in London soil, evidence of Boudica's fiery devastation. It is thought that the Queen's last battle had occurred there. The discovery of the remains of an elephant with an axe embedded in its skull led to the assumption that Romans had brought over the elephant and that a Celtic warrior had wedged a weapon into its head. People reasoned this soldier could have fought in the Boudica's army. Other evidence in the vicinity suggested this might be the case. However, modern research has debunked this romantic theory. The elephant and axe date from the Neolithic era, well before Boudica's time, and historians cannot say with accuracy where Boudica makes her final stand. The notion that Boudica lies beneath King's Cross Station doesn't appear to have emerged until the Second World War. The whole thing may have started as a joke, with Platform 10 perhaps suggested because trains for Cambridge left from there, and Cambridge was reasonably close to East Anglia, home of Boudica's Iceni tribe. The idea, however, soon caught on, who perhaps sees the concept of a British monarch, the name Boudica means victory, resisting a mighty military power from the continent. An urban legend was therefore born, and Boudica's ghost, presumably flying her chariot down escalators and through tunnels, her famous yellow hair streaming out behind her, was allied to London's Underground's strange collection of spooks. The screaming spectre at Farringdon is thought to be the ghost of Anne Naylor. Anne lived at the Farringdon district before the station was built, then a poor and disreputable area full of criminals and gambling dens. 13-year-old Anne had been apprenticed to a mother and daughter who ran a hat-making business, but her mistresses were sadistic, subjecting her to vicious beatings and starvation. After one especially brutal assault, the mother and daughter were shocked to find that Anne had died. Panicking, they stowed Anne's body into the attic, but a gruesome smell soon gave away and she'd started to decompose. They tried to dispose of Anne's corpse by chopping it up and burning it on the fire, but abandoned this when they realised the stench of burning flesh might alert their neighbours. In desperation, they threw what remained of Anne into an open sewer, which lay where Farringdon Station would later be constructed. Anne's remains were found, but amazingly the coroner, despite the fact that she had been dismembered and burned, ruled that she hadn't been murdered. The crime again faded from memory until Farringdon Underground Station was built and rumours began to circulate of Anne's ghost. It is said that if you stand on the platform at night, you can hear Anne's shrieks echoing down the tracks. Situated at the epicentre of London's financial district, Bank is one of the oldest and busiest stations on the Underground. Legend claims part of it was constructed on the site of a plague pit. The Northern Line ticket hole was once a crypt in the adjacent St Mary's Walnoth Church. The dead, thought to number between 7,000 and 8,000, were cleared out of the station in 1900 when it was built, with some being sent to South London's Nunhead Cemetery. One of the doorways leading down to the ticket hole was the crypt entrance. In January 1941, tragedy hit the London station when it sustained a hit from a German bomb. The station was being used as an air raid shelter and 56 people were killed. The most infamous ghost connected with Bank Underground Station is that of Sarah Whitehead, otherwise known as the Old Lady of Threadneedle Street, or the Black Nun. Legend goes that Sarah's brother Philip was a clerk at the nearby Bank of England, was fond of living a luxurious life. Surrounded by wealthy bankers and city traders, Philip didn't see why his clerk salary should prevent him from enjoying a similar lifestyle to his peers, so he'd borrowed money and got into debt. Philip's younger sister, Sarah, oblivious to the growing financial problems, participated in the high life with him, eating great food and drinking quality wines. Philip, however, knew something had to change. He'd got into investing at the stock market but had lost money. He tried gambling, which led him to spiral into even more desperate depths. He was driven to anxiety, and one day he listened to a friend who suggested he should forge a cheque at his workplace. He did that, managing to steal £87, which is around 3,000 in modern money. Philip was soon found out and sent to Newgate Prison to await trial. Philip sheltered his sensitive sister from all of this, arranging for her to stay with friends who lived off Fleet Street. This was so if he was found guilty, she wouldn't hear the bells of St Specula's church tolling as he was led out of Newgate to face his execution. He was indeed sent to death and was executed in 1812. After Sarah returned home, she wondered where her brother was and started going to his former place of employment to inquire about him. She asked his clerks, and they replied, "Not today, madame," before assuring her that he was absent but well. One day, a tactless clerk blurted out what had happened, informing Sarah that he had been rightly executed. This enormous and dreadful shock made Sarah lose her reason. She began dressing in black and was unable to process the fact of Philip's death. She continued to visit the bank every day. She asked the clerks if they'd seen her brother, which the clerks out of pity would answer, "Not today." She would chat with them for a while before saying, "Give my love to him. When he returns, I will call tomorrow." Some say the authorities at the bank first treated her kindly. She was given food and money and was sometimes allowed to use a room. But employees soon tired of her visits. As her mental condition declined, they began to fear the unhinged, black-clad woman and increasing aggressive demands for cash. Some say she turned up at the bank every day until her death 25 years later. Others claim that the daily visits lasted an astonishing 40 years. As the years passed, the old figure acquired nicknames: the Black Nun, the Bank Nun, and the Old Lady of Threadneedle Street. This was the colloquial name for the Bank of England itself, a name it might have acquired from its darkly clothed visitor. Sarah, who was 19 at the time of Philip's execution, is thought to have passed away in 1837. Shock, grief, and her strange lifestyle may have aged her prematurely. She is said to be buried very close to the Bank of England, but it seems even death couldn't break Sarah's habit of haunting her brother's workplace. There have been sightings of Sarah's ghost in and around the Bank of England and also in and around Bank Underground Station. The ghost apparently approaches pedestrians on the street, asking if they'd seen her brother. Some of those approached, including groups of American tourists, had never before heard the legend. In the 1970s, 2 men saw a woman dressed in black walking along the garden path before falling to her knees and striking the path stones while shaking her head before vanishing. British Museum Underground Station opened in 1900 and closed in 1933, and during its brief career, it acquired a very peculiar ghost. A secret tunnel is alleged to link the station to the museum. Down this tunnel at night, the ghost of an ancient Egyptian woman, a priestess in some accounts, and princess in others, wearing a headdress and loincloth. The woman would terrify staff and passengers with the most horrendous shrieks that resounded along the tracks and reverberated down corridors. Named Amun-Ra after the powerful Egyptian god she served, the woman's mummy is said to have resided in the British Museum. The ghost howls of anguish and rage are apparently triggered by the trauma of having her mummy ripped from its resting place and transported far overseas. Excavated in Luxor in the 1880s, this 3,500-year-old mummy was purchased by the Englishman Thomas Douglas Murray during his visit to Egypt in 1899. Murray soon suffered a shooting accident, meaning his arm had to be amputated, and 2 of his servants who had handled the mummy had died. Murray followed Amun-Ra back to England, where the ill luck continued. A journalist borrowed the casket, and soon her mother died. Her engagement broke up and her dogs went mad. She quickly returned the casket to Murray. Murray eagerly gave it to a friend, who suffered a series of misfortunes and then died. Before his death, Murray's friend gave it to his sister, who, as well as enduring an inevitable string of bad luck, took the money to be photographed. Whilst developing his pictures, the photographer, who soon passed away, was horrified to see the face of a living Egyptian woman superimposed on the casket, whose eyes stared furiously with an expression of singular malevolence. When a person who purchased one of these photos brought it into his home, every piece of glass in the house shattered. Murray, alarmed and depressed by this constant stream of calamities, urged his sister's friend to get rid of the money. She donated it to the British Museum, who exhibited Amun-Ra alongside other Egyptian artefacts. The mummy, however, didn't lose her troublesome reputation. The carrier who delivered her to the museum died, and some visitors who sketched or photographed the mummy died too, with one individual shooting himself. Staff reported sobs and hammering noises coming from the casket, which did not stop when they moved the mummy to her own more prestigious display case. Amun-Ra began haunting the nearby London Underground train station. Shortly before the station closed, 2 British newspapers promised a cash reward to anybody brave enough to spend a night there, but no one took the offer. A movie, Bulldog Jack, was inspired by this story, and on the night of its premiere, 2 women vanished by walking through the tunnels of Holborn Station. Screams and moans were heard at the time of their disappearance, as well as several times during the following days, where sightings were reported of the headdress-wearing priestess. Strange scratch marks appeared on the wall of the abandoned British Museum station. The woman was never seen again. To this day, it's said that at Holborn you can occasionally hear shrieks and wails echoing down the tunnels of the British Museum station. This legend and haunting is likely to have been generated by the publicity surrounding the unlucky mummy, of which there was a lot at the time. But sober examination of the facts makes the story seem less spectacular. The actual mummy of Amun-Ra was probably never even brought to England, which was instead transported, and what ended up in the museum was just a mummy case. Whilst the case is likely to have enclosed the mummy of a high-status person, there is no evidence of it belonging to priestess or princess or anyone called Amun-Ra. So that's it for today's episode. I really hope you liked it. Big shout out to the blog The Serpents Pen and David Castleton, who wrote the story of the Hauntings so well. I'd definitely check out that blog if you want to see some more. But if you like this episode, please give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.